Welcome back, and thank you for tuning in to HK Cheating Stories. We appreciate each and every one of you joining us. Where in the world are you watching from? Let us know in the comments. Now, let's get the story started. Have you ever thought you had life all figured out, only to have it ripped apart in an instant? I did. My name is Nathan Hale, and for 17 years, I believed I had the perfect marriage, the perfect family. I worked hard, provided for my wife and kids, and never doubted that love was enough. Until the day I walked into my own bedroom and found betrayal waiting for me. That moment changed everything. But what I didn't know then was that losing everything would lead me to something greater. This is my story. I never expected my life to fall apart on a Tuesday evening. It was our anniversary, 12 years of marriage. I left work early, holding a bouquet of white roses, her favorite. I had a stupid smile on my face, thinking about how surprised Samantha would be when I walked through that door. I imagined the moment in my head. She'd gasp, smile, maybe even tear up a little. She'd throw her arms around me, tell me how much she loved me, and we'd spend the evening reminiscing about our journey together. But I was a fool. The moment I stepped into our home, something felt off. The house was too quiet. The air felt thick, heavy with something I couldn't place. My gut twisted, and I hesitated in the hallway. Then I heard it, a laugh, a deep, unfamiliar male laugh. The sound came from our bedroom. For a moment, I stood frozen. My grip on the bouquet tightened, the petals crumpling between my fingers. My mind raced. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe the TV was on. Maybe, I don't know what kind of idiot part of me still wanted to believe in my wife, but that part died the second I pushed open the bedroom door. And there she was, Samantha, my wife, naked, tangled in our sheets. And she wasn't alone. The bastard lying next to her didn't even look up right away. He was comfortable, relaxed, his hand resting lazily on my wife's thigh, like he belonged there. My stomach dropped. My heart pounded so hard I thought my ribs would crack. Samantha? My voice barely came out. She turned. Her eyes went wide. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. Because what could she say? There was no excuse. No way to lie her way out of this. I stepped forward, my fist clenching. I didn't even realize I'd crushed the bouquet in my hand until I saw the broken petals scattered on the floor. A perfect metaphor for our marriage. How could you? My voice was eerily calm. Too calm. It scared me. She said nothing. No apologies. No begging. Just silence. And then, the bastard beside her had the audacity to smirk. He stretched, completely unbothered, then glanced at me like I was an inconvenience. Hey man, do you mind? We're kind of in the middle of something here. I saw red. My breath came out in sharp bursts, my hands trembling with rage. I wanted to lunge at him, to drag him out of that bed and beat the living hell out of him. But then, Samantha spoke. Liam, just go. Just go. Like I was the intruder. Like I was the one ruining something. I let out a hollow, humorless laugh. You want me to go? She swallowed. Please, just leave. Let's talk about this later. Later. Like this was a minor inconvenience. Like it was something we could just sweep under the rug and forget. I took one last look at the woman I had loved for 17 years. And I felt nothing. The pain was there, sure. The betrayal burned like acid in my veins. But deep inside, somewhere beneath all the hurt, something snapped. The love? Gone. The trust? Destroyed. And the man I used to be? Dead. I turned on my heel and walked out. I didn't yell. Didn't scream. Didn't even slam the door. I just left. Because I knew I was never coming back. I drove without a destination. The city lights blurred through my windshield, but I barely saw them. My fingers gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My heart pounded, not from fear, but from pure, seething rage. Samantha, my wife, the woman I built my life with, the mother of my children. And yet, in a single night, she had destroyed it all. I pulled into the parking lot of a cheap motel, my hands still shaking. I didn't even hesitate, just grabbed my wallet, paid in cash, and took the key. I didn't want a trail for her to follow. If she checked our bank account and saw a charge, she might think she could come knocking. No, she didn't get to know where I was. Inside the room, I stood in the darkness, breathing heavily. My mind kept replaying the moment over and over. Her lying there, her lips parting in shock, the disgusting smirk on that bastard's face. I grabbed my phone. My fingers hovered over a number, but I stopped myself. What was there to say? What words could undo what she had done? Instead, I opened my browser and searched best divorce lawyers in the city. She thought she could cheat on me and still keep everything? Not a chance. The plan. The next morning, I woke up feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. My eyes burned from lack of sleep, my body ached, but my mind was clearer than ever. First order of business. Call the lawyer. I found a name with stellar reviews and a reputation for winning big, Jonathan Miles. I dialed his office, and a crisp, professional voice answered. Miles and Associates. How can I help you? Yeah, I need a divorce lawyer. The best. A pause. Then, do you have an appointment? Make one. As soon as possible. I gave him my details and hung up. Next, I called my bank. Within minutes, I froze our joint account and transferred half of the money into a new one in her name. Not out of generosity, just to cover my ass in court. If I left her with nothing, she could claim financial abuse. But half was fair. Then, I handled the house. Samantha had no idea, but I had already planned to put our home in my name alone years ago. I had the documents drawn up. I just never had the heart to finalize them. Today I did. I contacted a moving company and arranged for them to clear out everything that belonged to me while she was at work. Clothes, personal items, even the couch I bought. By the time she got home, the house would feel as empty as my heart. The messages. I didn't answer my phone all day. By evening, the text started rolling in. Samantha. Liam. We need to talk. Please come home. Samantha. I made a mistake. It didn't mean anything. Samantha. Just come home so we can fix this. Fix this? I laughed. Fix what? The life she shattered? The trust she burned? I ignored every message. Then, around 6 p.m., the begging started. Samantha. Please, Liam. The kids are asking about you. They're waiting for you for dinner. My stomach twisted. Not because I felt guilty, but because I knew what was coming next. Emma and Lucas. And right on cue, my phone rang. Emma. I hesitated. For the first time all day, my fingers trembled as I answered. Hey, sweetheart, I said, trying to sound normal. Dad, where are you? She asked, her voice laced with concern. Mom is freaking out. Good, but I forced myself to stay calm. I had to take a sudden business trip, honey. It was last minute. A pause. Then, why is Miss Tyler with you? I blinked. What? The conference lady. Miss Tyler. Mom said you're with her. My grip on the phone tightened. I heard Samantha's voice in the background, desperate, frantic. I realized what she was doing. She was trying to flip the script, trying to paint me as the cheater. Unbelievable. I clenched my jaw, forcing my voice to stay even. Emma, sweetheart, that's not true. But listen, I need you to trust me, okay? I do, Dad, she whispered. But when are you coming home? I closed my eyes. How do you tell your 16-year-old daughter that home no longer exists? The breaking point. By 9 p.m., Samantha switched tactics. She stopped begging for forgiveness and started playing mind games. Samantha, fine. If you want to act like a child and ignore me, go ahead. But just know, I'm going to live my life however I want now. Samantha, I'll have men over. I'll bring them into our home. Samantha, and I'll sleep with whoever I damn well please. That's when I snapped. I called her. The moment she picked up, I growled, You're dead to me, Samantha. Silence. Then, her voice cracked. Liam, wait. I hung up. That was the last time I ever spoke to my wife. By morning, she would find an empty house and divorce papers on the kitchen counter. She had made her bed. Now, she could lie in it. I left town the same way I left my marriage, without looking back. Charlotte, North Carolina, a city that had nothing to do with my past. No shared memories. No familiar faces. No ghosts. It was supposed to be my fresh start. For the first few months, I threw myself into work at the bank corporate office, barely coming up for air. My career was the one thing Samantha hadn't managed to ruin. I worked late. I worked weekends. I took on projects no one else wanted, pushing myself to exhaustion. If I was too busy, I wouldn't have time to think. Wouldn't have time to remember the house I left behind, the kids I had abandoned, the life I once had. The anger kept me warm. But anger doesn't last forever. The hollow years. I became the office ghost. People avoided me, not because I was cruel, but because I didn't engage. I spoke when spoken to. I attended meetings. I did my job better than anyone else. But I was cold. The few times I did speak, my words came out sharp, clipped, emotionless. I had built walls so high, nobody dared to climb them. And honestly, I preferred it that way. Because the few times I let my mind wander, the pain came rushing back like a tidal wave. I tried dating once. A coworker set me up with her friend. Nice woman, beautiful, smart. And the second she reached for my hand, I flinched. Because for the first time in 2 years, I felt something, and it terrified me. I ended the night early. Went home, stared at the ceiling, my heart hammering like I had just survived an attack. That's when I knew I wasn't ready. Hell, maybe I'd never be ready. The woman who changed everything. And then came Isabella Cruz. She didn't knock, didn't tiptoe around me like everyone else. No, Isabella stormed into my office one afternoon, hands on her hips, brown eyes blazing. All right, Reynolds, enough of this. I blinked at her. Excuse me, enough with the whole brooding, tortured businessman thing. It's making the rest of us miserable. I stared. Nobody talked to me like that. For a moment, I debated snapping at her. But something in her face, something fierce and completely unafraid, stopped me. Instead, I did something I hadn't done in years. I laughed. A real, genuine laugh. It felt strange, foreign, like dusting off an old record and hearing a song you thought you'd forgotten. Isabella smirked. There it is. And just like that, something shifted. The slow rebuild. I started noticing her. The way she walked into a room like she owned it. The way she challenged me, never intimidated by my cold demeanor. The way she made me feel human again. But I wasn't stupid. I knew the risks. I knew what happened when you let someone in. So I fought it. Kept things professional. Kept my distance. But Isabella? She was patient. She never pushed, never forced me to talk. She just existed near me. And somehow that was enough. She made jokes at my expense. Rolled her eyes at my sarcasm. Made snide remarks about my taste in coffee. And slowly, so damn slowly, she started melting the ice around my heart. One evening, after a long day at work, she caught me staring at the city skyline from my office window. She didn't say anything, just placed a cup of coffee on my desk and sat across from me. We sat in silence, and for the first time in a long time, it wasn't uncomfortable. The first date that wasn't a date. It took me 3 months to finally ask her out. Even then, I hesitated. Dinner. As colleagues. I clarified. Not a date. Isabella just smiled. Whatever helps you sleep at night, Reynolds. I almost backed out 3 times before the actual dinner. But when she walked into the restaurant, wearing that smug little grin, something inside me loosened. It was easy, natural, and maybe for the first time since my marriage crashed and burned, I felt something real again. Letting go of the past. We didn't rush into anything. Isabella was careful with me, even when she didn't realize it. She gave me space, but she never let me disappear. And when she finally found out about my past, about Samantha, the cheating, the divorce, the kids I had walked away from, she didn't pity me. She didn't tell me to move on. She just listened. And that meant more than anything. A new beginning. 2 years after leaving my old life behind, I wasn't the same man anymore. I still had scars. Still had nights where I woke up drenched in sweat, haunted by ghosts I thought I had buried. But I wasn't bitter anymore. I wasn't empty. Because Isabella, she taught me how to live again. And I finally let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, I was capable of loving someone the way they deserved. For the first time in years, my life wasn't defined by betrayal. It was defined by something new, something real, something worth fighting for. Life was finally moving forward. I had a new city, a new home, and, against all odds, a new love. For the first time in years, I wasn't living in the shadow of betrayal. I had let go of the anger, let go of the pain, let go of the woman who destroyed me. But the past has a funny way of catching up to you. And mine came knocking one evening with a single phone call. The call that changed everything. I was in my office when my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number. Probably a telemarketer. I almost ignored it. I wish I had, because when I answered, I wasn't prepared for what I heard. Dad. The word hit me like a freight train. My grip on the phone tightened. My heart slammed against my ribs. That voice. Emma. My daughter. I hadn't heard her voice in 7 years. 7 long, silent years. And now, out of nowhere, she was calling me. I swallowed hard, my throat suddenly dry. Emma. A sharp inhale, then a shaky exhale. Dad, please don't hang up. I felt my pulse in my ears. My jaw clenched. My body went stiff. I wasn't ready for this. Not now. Not ever. If I didn't hang up, I couldn't. A conversation I never expected. There was a pause, so heavy, so tense I could feel it pressing against my chest. Then she spoke again. I'm getting married. I blinked. The words didn't register at first. Married? My daughter, my little girl, was getting married, and I wasn't there to see her grow up. I wasn't there for her proms, her heartbreaks, her victories. I wasn't there for anything. A sharp pain twisted in my gut, but I shoved it down. This wasn't about me. I cleared my throat, forcing my voice to stay even. Congratulations. Emma let out a breath, like she had been afraid I wouldn't say it. I wanted to tell you sooner, she admitted, her voice fragile, hesitant. But I didn't know if you want to hear from me. That hit harder than I expected, because the truth was I hadn't let myself think about them. Not really. Not Emma. Not Lucas. Not the life I walked away from. It was easier that way. But now she was here, on the phone, reaching out, and I had no idea what to do. The wound that never healed. When's the wedding? I asked, my voice rougher than I intended. March, she said quietly. I want you to be there, Dad. I exhaled slowly. My grip on the phone tightened. She wanted me there. After everything. After the years of silence. After the day she turned her back on me. I should have been happy, but all I felt was fear. What if she had only called because she needed something? What if this was just a formality? What if I walked back into their lives, only to be pushed out again? I didn't think I could survive that twice. A risk worth taking. Emma. I hesitated. Why now? She was silent for a long moment. Then, softly, because I miss you. My throat tightened. Because I was a stupid kid, she continued, voice trembling. Because I listened to Mom. Because I thought if I stayed away long enough, you'd come back. I closed my eyes, pain slamming into my chest like a hammer. She had been waiting for me. All these years, I thought they didn't want me. But maybe, just maybe, they were just as lost as I was. Dad, Emma whispered. Please just think about it. I swallowed hard. I will. She let out a relieved breath. Thank you. And then, before I could second-guess myself, I want to meet your fiancé. A small, hopeful laugh. Really? Yes. Because if I was doing this, if I was stepping back into their lives, I needed to do it right. No half measures. No hesitation. I had already lost 7 years. I wasn't going to lose anymore. A new chapter. That night, I sat in my apartment, staring at my phone. Isabella curled up beside me on the couch, resting her head on my shoulder. She had known something was wrong the moment I came home. She didn't push, just sat there, waiting. Finally, I spoke. My daughter called me today. She sat up, her dark eyes searching mine. And I exhaled. She's getting married. Her expression softened. Liam, that's wonderful. I let out a short, humorless chuckle. Yeah, it is. A long silence stretched between us. Then Isabella took my hand, squeezing it gently. Are you going? I hesitated. The Olmi would have said no. Would have stayed in the past, drowning in my mistakes, afraid of being hurt again. But that man was dead. I wasn't the same bitter, broken wreck I used to be. I had rebuilt myself. And maybe, just maybe, this was my chance to rebuild something else. I squeezed Isabella's hand back. Yeah, I said, voice steady. I think I am. I spent the next few weeks wrestling with my own demons. Emma's phone call had torn open a wound I thought had long since scarred over. But hadn't. It had just been buried, waiting for the right moment to resurface. And now, as I sat on the plane, staring blankly out the window, I felt the full weight of it. 7 years. 7 years since I walked away from my children. 7 years since they turned their backs on me. 7 years since I convinced myself that I no longer had a family. And now, I was about to see them again. to stand in front of the daughter who had begged me to come back, to face the son I had abandoned. And I had no idea what I was walking into. The airport reunion. The plane landed in Kansas City late in the afternoon. I stepped off the jet bridge, my heart pounding. My hands were clammy, my jaw clenched. What if she'd change her mind? What if this was a mistake? What if I wasn't ready? I scanned the crowd, my stomach twisting into knots. And then I saw her, Emma. She stood near the baggage claim, twisting her hands together nervously. She looked older, no longer the 16-year-old girl who had called me a coward and turned her back on me. Now she was a grown woman. Her dark brown hair was longer, curling slightly at the ends. Her face had matured, but she still had the same bright green eyes, her mother's eyes. And when she spotted me, those eyes widened with emotion. I swallowed hard. My legs felt like lead as I forced myself forward. Closer, closer. And then, just as I stopped in front of her, she threw her arms around me. Dad. Her voice cracked, and I felt her tremble against me. For a moment, I stood frozen, unable to move, unable to process what was happening. Then, slowly, hesitantly, I wrapped my arms around her. And for the first time in 7 years, I held my daughter, facing the son who hated me. Emma wasn't the one I was most afraid of. It was Lucas, my son, the boy who had once looked up to me, the boy who, in our last conversation, had dismissed me like I was nothing. It's just sex, Dad. Can we just go back to how things were? That sentence had been the final nail in the coffin of my old life. And now I had to face him. Emma led me to her car, chattering nervously about the wedding plans, her fiancé, the venue, the dress. I nodded along, but my mind was elsewhere, at her house, where Lucas was waiting, where I was about to find out if I had truly lost my son. The drive was short, but my pulse pounded in my ears the whole way. And when Emma pulled into the driveway, my breath hitched, because standing on the porch, arms crossed, expression unreadable, was Lucas, my son, now 21 years old, and looking at me like I was a stranger. The tension breaks. I stepped out of the car, my legs feeling unsteady. Lucas didn't move, didn't say a word. He just stood there, his jaw tight, his fists clenched. Emma shot him a warning look. Lucas, why did you come? His voice was low, sharp, laced with resentment. It felt like a punch to the gut, but I took a breath, forced myself to answer. Because your sister asked me to. A flicker of something passed through his eyes. Anger, maybe pain, maybe something else. He scoffed, shaking his head. Took you long enough. I clenched my fists, steadying myself. Yeah, it did. He studied me for a long moment. Then, without another word, he turned and walked inside. Emma let out a breath, giving me an apologetic glance. He just needs time. I nodded, even though it felt like my heart had been ripped out of my chest. Time. I had already lost 7 years. How much more time could I afford to waste? The conversation that needed to happen. Dinner that night was tense. Lucas barely spoke. When he did, his words were short, clipped, filled with quiet resentment. Emma and her fiancé, Daniel, tried to keep the conversation light, but I could feel the weight in the air. The unspoken words hanging over us like a storm cloud. And then, finally, Lucas set down his fork, his gaze locking onto mine. Why did you really leave? The room went silent. Emma tensed beside me. Daniel cleared his throat. Maybe we should... No, Lucas cut him off. I want to hear him say it. I swallowed hard, my chest aching. I had prepared myself for this moment. But now that it was here, I didn't know where to begin. So I told the truth. All I saw was betrayal. Lucas's jaw clenched. I wasn't strong enough, I admitted. I thought you and Emma were choosing her. And I couldn't handle that. His fist tightened. So you just gave up? I shook my head. No. I ran. His eyes flashed with something raw. Pain. Anger. Something between them. For a long time, he said nothing. Then, finally, he pushed his chair back and stood. Without another word, he left the room. I let out a slow, shaking breath, staring at the empty doorway. Emma reached over, squeezing my hand. He'll come around. I want to believe her. I needed to believe her. But as I sat there, staring at my untouched plate, I realized something. Coming back had been the easy part. Earning my son's forgiveness? That was going to be a battle, and I wasn't sure if I'd ever win. Lucas didn't speak to me for the next 2 days. He was polite, barely. A forced morning here, a stiff nod there, but nothing more. It was like I was a ghost in my own family. And maybe I deserved that. Maybe I deserved worse. But I wasn't here to run this time. I was here to fight for them. For him. For us. And whether Lucas liked it or not, we were going to have this conversation. Even if I had to drag it out of him. A walk we both needed. It happened on the third morning. I was sitting on the back porch with a cup of coffee, staring at the sky, when the screen door creaked open behind me. I turned. Lucas. He stepped outside, hands shoved into his pockets. For a moment, he just stood there, staring at the ground. Then, finally, want to go for a walk. I didn't hesitate. Yeah. He didn't wait for me, just started walking toward the small wooded path behind the house. I followed. For the first few minutes, neither of us spoke. The only sounds were the crunch of dead leaves beneath our feet and the distant hum of the wind through the trees. Then, without warning, Lucas let out a short, bitter laugh. You know, I used to walk this trail all the time after you left. I swallowed hard. Yeah. He kicked a rock off the path. I just walk. Try to make sense of it. Try to figure out what the hell I did wrong. The words hit me like a sledgehammer. Lucas, you left, Dad. His voice was sharp, filled with years of hurt. You didn't even fight for us. You just walked away. Guilt coiled around my throat like a noose. I had told myself that they didn't want me, that they had chosen their mother over me. But now, standing here, I realized something awful. They had been kids. Kids who had been fed their mother's lies. Kids who had been hurt and confused and waiting for me to prove I still cared. And I had failed them. I had failed him. The hardest words I've ever said. I exhaled slowly, forcing myself to meet his gaze. You're right. Lucas blinked, caught off guard. I took a shaky breath. I should have fought. I should have stayed. I should have done a million things differently. His jaw tightened. He looked away. Yeah, well, should have doesn't mean shit now. I nodded, my chest tight. I know. Silence. He kicked another rock. I stared at the dirt. Then, quietly, you heard us, Dad. I closed my eyes. I know. The breaking point. Lucas let out a breath, sharp and unsteady. When Mom told us you weren't coming back, I didn't believe her. He shook his head. I kept waiting for you to show up at the door. Thought maybe you'd prove her wrong. Thought maybe you'd come back and fix everything. I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms. Then the years passed, and you never did. He turned to me, his eyes burning. And I hated you for it. My throat was raw. My chest felt like it was caving in. I had done this to him. I don't expect you to forgive me, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Lucas scoffed. Good, 'cause I'm not there yet. I nodded. I had expected that. But I wasn't giving up. Not this time. An unexpected question. We walked in silence for a while. Then, out of nowhere, so, you're married again? I hesitated. Yeah. Lucas stuffed his hands deeper into his pockets. She good to you? A small smile touched my lips. Yeah, she is. He nodded, still looking ahead. She know about us? I swallowed the lump in my throat. Yeah, she knows everything. Lucas let out a dry chuckle. But she thinks we're assholes. I actually laughed at that. Not at all. She's been telling me for years to reach out. He raised an eyebrow. Years. I nodded. She wanted me to fix things. But I was too damn scared. Lucas didn't respond right away. Then, finally, she sounds decent. She is. We reached a small clearing, the wind picking up around us. And for the first time since I arrived, I saw something in Lucas's eyes. Something that wasn't resentment. Something that looked a little like hope. A small step forward. As we headed back to the house, Lucas suddenly sighed. Emma said you're staying for the wedding. I nodded. Yeah, if you'll have me. He didn't answer right away. But when we reached the porch, he glanced at me, his face unreadable. You can stay. It wasn't much, but it was something. And for now, that was enough. The tension between Lucas and me didn't vanish overnight. But something had shifted. The cold, hostile silence was gone. He still wasn't warm toward me, but at least he wasn't looking at me like I was a stranger who had no right to be here. And honestly, that was more than I had expected. I took what I could get. A test of loyalty. The days leading up to Emma's wedding were a blur of preparations. Flowers, seating charts, last-minute dress alterations. Emma was in full bridezilla mode, and Daniel, her fiancé, just nodded along like a soldier following orders. And me? I stayed out of the way, until the day Emma walked into the living room, arms crossed, frustration all over her face. Mom called. I felt my stomach drop. Lucas, who had been lounging on the couch, suddenly went rigid. Emma's jaw clenched. She wants to come to the wedding. Silence. Lucas let out a sharp bark of laughter, shaking his head. Of course she does. I inhaled deeply, steadying myself. And what do you want to do? Emma hesitated. I don't know. Lucas, on the other hand, had no such uncertainty. She doesn't deserve to be there. Emma bit her lip, glancing between us. She says she wants to make things right. Lucas's fists clenched. She had 7 years to do that. I watched my son carefully. He had been furious with me for leaving. But the anger he had toward his mother, it burned deeper. I turned to Emma. Are you inviting her because you want to, or because you feel guilty? She looked away. That was answer enough. After a long pause, she exhaled. She can come, but she's not ruining my day. If she tries, she's out. Lucas scoffed, but didn't argue. And me? I just prayed that woman wouldn't find a way to ruin one more thing. When the past walks through the door, the day of the wedding came too fast. I was dressed in my suit, my tie knotted too tight, standing at the back of the church when I saw her. Samantha, my ex-wife. She was standing at the entrance, looking around like she belonged here, like she hadn't torn everything apart. My hands clenched at my sides. She hadn't changed much. A little older, a little more makeup to cover the cracks. But the fake charm was still there, the same manipulative sweetness she had always used to get her way. Lucas saw her, too. I felt him tense beside me. She spotted us, and, God help me, she smiled. Like we were old friends. Like she hadn't spent years poisoning my kids against me. She walked toward us, heels clicking against the floor. Nathan. Lucas. Lucas didn't respond. Neither did I. She sighed, giving me that same exasperated look she used to give when she was putting up with my stubbornness. Nathan, I just wanted to say how happy I am that you're here. I stared at her. That makes one of us. She let out a soft laugh, shaking her head. Still so dramatic. Lucas stepped forward before I could. No, he said, his voice cold. Dramatic is what you did after Dad left. Samantha's face twitched, but she kept smiling. I know you're still upset with me, honey, but don't. Lucas cut her off. Don't act like this is normal. Like you didn't screw up our lives. Her smile faltered. You lied to us. Lucas's voice rose. You made us think Dad abandoned us, when really, you pushed him away. People were starting to look. Samantha glanced around nervously, then sighed dramatically, placing a hand on her chest. Lucas, I was hurt. I wasn't thinking clearly. That's bull. His voice was sharp. You knew exactly what you were doing. For the first time, she looked nervous. She glanced at me, expecting me to step in. But I just stood there. This wasn't my fight. Not anymore. This was Lucas's moment. And he was winning. The final cut. Samantha tried to salvage the moment. She softened her voice, reaching for his arm. Honey, I just want us to be a family again. Lucas stepped back. No, he said, his voice firm. You don't get to say that. Samantha's face froze. I used to think Dad was the bad guy, Lucas continued. But now I see that he was just the first one smart enough to leave you. Her face twisted in pain. Lucas, please. But he was already walking away. And just like that, the spell was broken. Samantha turned to me, her face unreadable. For the first time since I had arrived, she had no power here. And she knew it. I met her gaze, my voice quiet but steady. You should go. Her lips parted slightly, like she wanted to argue. But she must have seen something in my expression, something that told her she no longer had control over any of us. Because without another word, she turned and walked out. Lucas didn't look back, and neither did I. A new beginning. The ceremony was beautiful. Emma walked down the aisle, beaming, and when I took her hand to give her away, she squeezed it tight. Thank you, Dad, she whispered. And for the first time in a long, long time, I felt like one. Lucas stood beside me, his expression unreadable. But when the vows were said and the guests stood to cheer, He bumped his shoulder against mine. It wasn't much, but it was enough. And as I looked at my children, finally free from the past, I knew we were a family again. The wedding was over, but the real work had just begun. Mending a broken family isn't like flipping a switch. It's slow, painful, uncertain. But for the first time in years, I had something I never thought I'd have again. A chance. A chance to be a father again. A chance to make up for lost time. And I wasn't going to waste it. The call that changed everything. It had been a few weeks since the wedding. Lucas and I had spoken more in that time than we had in the last 7 years combined. It wasn't always easy. Some days, it felt like we were walking on glass. Careful, hesitant, afraid of saying the wrong thing. But we were trying. And then, one night, my phone rang. Lucas. I froze. He never called me first. Ever. I picked up. Hey, kid. There was a long pause. Then, in a voice so quiet I almost didn't hear it, Dad, I need you. Facing the ghosts of the past. I was in my car within 5 minutes. Didn't even bother putting on real shoes. Just grabbed my keys, told Catalina I'd explain later, and drove. Lucas had sent me an address, some bar on the outskirts of town. I wasn't sure what I was walking into. But the moment I saw him, slumped over on the curb outside the bar, his hands gripping his hair, I knew something had broken in him. I parked and rushed over. Lucas. He didn't look up, just let out a bitter laugh. She called. I didn't need to ask who. Samantha. Of course she did. She said she wanted to talk, that she deserved another chance. My fists clenched. And what did you tell her? He exhaled sharply. That she deserved exactly what she got. A surge of pride swelled in my chest. But then his voice cracked. But it still hurts. I lower myself onto the curb beside him. Yeah, kid. It does. He was silent for a long time. Then, finally, how did you do it? I frowned. Do what? He looked at me, his eyes raw. How did you walk away from her? I swallowed hard. That was the thing, wasn't it? I hadn't just walked away from her. I had walked away from them. And I had regretted it every damn day since. I exhaled slowly. I thought I was doing what was best. I thought I was protecting myself from more pain. Lucas scoffed. Yeah, and look how that turned out. I let out a short laugh. Yeah, look how that turned out. Silence stretched between us. But this time, it wasn't uncomfortable. It was understanding. We both knew what it was like to have been fooled by her, to have been hurt by her, and to have been left to pick up the pieces. Breaking the cycle. After a while, Lucas sighed. I don't want to be like her. I turned to him. You won't be. He shook his head. No, you don't get it. He hesitated, running a hand through his hair. I've spent so many years being angry, holding on to this resentment. And now, I don't know what to do with it. I knew that feeling too well. Then let it go, I said. He let out a bitter laugh. It's not that easy. No, I admitted. It's not. But I put a hand on his shoulder, gripping it tight. But I'll be here to help you figure it out. Lucas stared at me. And then, slowly, he nodded. A different kind of goodbye. I drove him home that night. Neither of us spoke much on the ride. But as he got out of the car, he turned back to me. Thanks, Dad. I hadn't heard those words in years. And maybe he didn't even realize how much they meant. But as I watched him walk inside, something in my chest, something I'd thought was long dead, came back to life. Hope. Real, honest, unshakable hope. Moving forward together. The next few months weren't perfect. There were still scars, old wounds that wouldn't heal overnight. But things were different now. Lucas started calling more. Not just when things were bad, but just to talk. Emma visited Catalina and me often, bringing Daniel along, filling our home with laughter and warmth. And then, one night, Catalina sat beside me on the couch, her fingers lacing through mine. You did it, she whispered. I looked at her, confused. Did what? She smiled softly. You got your family back. I glanced at my phone, where a new message from Lucas sat unread. Hey, Dad, want to grab a beer this weekend? I swallowed the lump in my throat. Maybe she was right. Maybe after everything, I hadn't lost him after all. Looking back, I realize now that pain can either destroy you or shape you into something stronger. I spent years believing I had lost everything. My marriage, my family, my children's love. But what I failed to understand back then was that family isn't just about blood. It's about choice, Asterisk, asterisk, it's about showing up, even when it's hard. For anyone out there who's been betrayed, abandoned, or left behind, let me tell you something. Asterisk, asterisk, you are not alone. Asterisk, asterisk. I made mistakes. I let anger dictate my choices. And for a long time, I thought walking away was the only way to survive. But the truth is, healing takes effort. It takes forgiveness, not just of others, but of yourself. If you've been hurt, don't let bitterness define you. Let it teach you. If you have loved ones you've drifted apart from, reach out before it's too late. If someone wants to make amends, listen, but don't forget the past. Learn from it. Asterisk, asterisk. Most of all, treasure the time you have left. Because in the end, family isn't about where you've been. It's about where you're willing to go together.